Welcome to the Shining a Light on Workplace Bullying podcast with Eylem and Norun. We are two career coaches with more than 20 years of corporate experience, and we have both gone through painful bullying experiences at work. This led us to study the dynamics of workplace bullying in depth. So the goal of this podcast is to shine a light on workplace bullying, to create awareness and break the taboos, learn how to master bullying situations, and look at how to prevent it, both from an individual and a company perspective. Hi again.
Hi, Norun. How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to the topic we have today because it's really important, I think.
Yes, I'm excited. Today, our topic is about how we recognize the bullies, right?
Yes, and that's also why we gave you, in the last podcast, we gave you a reference that you could look at, the bully quiz of Sam Horn, because that's really the first step, is to recognize these people. And also to understand that they exist. This was what I struggled with in my case. It took me almost 3 years to understand what was going on, that this person did not think like me.
Exactly. They are different than us, right?
Yeah.
They are different than the targets.
Yeah.
And they have different type of personalities and behaviors.
Yeah.
And for us, of course, for the targets, it is sometimes very difficult to understand their personalities and why they are doing this type of behaviors or communicating in this way. It took me also about a year to understand what was going on. And then, of course, I also tried certain type of things. But today we will talk also about how they behave, how they communicate, what they do, and what we should not do when we recognize this type of things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll try to go through some of the typical characteristics, right? And I mean, bullies come in different degrees. So maybe we just go through some bullies might have some of these character traits. Some might have more or less, and to different degrees. I think that's really important to that everybody understands.
Exactly. So let's start.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I think also before we start, maybe you made a really good distinction once between what's a real bully and what's just bad leadership style.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of times when I share my story being bullied and the behaviors I had perceived, I get the question, don't you think these are bad leadership style, or these are lack of leadership style, And the occupational research makes also a clear differentiation between lack of leadership style or bad leadership style and bullying behaviors, because the bullying, this is also something that is really, you can see in a lot of articles, research articles and publications, that there are two types of personalities who are the bullies, right? The narcissistic personality and the psychopathic personality. And as we all know, the personality, there is a genetic inheritance, but there's also the role modeling, right? There are people who genetically inherited it, and there are people who have learned it, this type of behaviors. And we know, if there's a company culture that is giving the room and space to this type of behaviors, these people once they find the room, they can blossom, they can grow. And we want to put like shine some light on those behaviors, what these behaviors are, and how we can recognize these behaviors.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you say, how this can influence the corporate culture. If you have such a person at the top, or maybe there's a history of having this type of personalities on the top, and also how this, in some people it's simply learned, and in some people it's actually, as you say, genetic, or it's inborn in a way. So that's a very important distinction to do, I think, and also to know that those who have it inborn is a very, very small percentage probably of people, but a lot of people learn it from them. If they set the culture as the leaders, other people will kind of take on similar character traits just to survive in this culture.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And also what we know is that these people are overrepresented in leadership roles, right?
Exactly. And yeah, the occupational research shows that 80% of the bullies are leaders and 20% are your peers.
Yeah.
And we know that the number of leaders within a company is a small proportion if in comparison to the rest of the employees. And this small proportion has actually a big impact on the rest of the company. And unfortunately, a negative impact if they have these bullying behaviors. And we want to be in a psychological safe work environment. We want to feel safe in many ways at work. And therefore, I think we both think that the leaders have the duty to contribute to the psychological safetiness of the work environment.
Yes, that's it. So let's look at some of the character traits.
Yes.
The first one is lack of empathy.
I made the experience that if I was hurt and I invited my manager to coffee to share that this behavior or this communication has hurt my feelings, I feel disengaged or I feel disappointed. The reaction or the response I got was like, oh, but that's your way of giving a meaning to that, or, oh, this is your own perception. So they could not really he could not really understand what I was going through, the pain that I was going through. So, and at that time, I couldn't understand. I was like, how can it be that this person doesn't understand the pain that I have? And he didn't understand it. And he was a father. I was like, this guy is a father. So he has a daughter. So how can it be that he does not understand my feelings, or at least try to understand? But they don't have the same level of empathy as we have.
Yeah. So the next thing we thought of was some of these people even lack feelings of remorse, meaning that they don't have the same ability to feel guilt and shame, or they don't have a conscience in the same way as the majority of people would have. So I don't know, do you have some experience with that?
Definitely, of course, because when I was doing something, of course, like, for example, I was made a lot of times to feel guilty for something that I even haven't done, right? So they want to put you in a situation where you feel ashamed and where you feel guilty. And they don't feel ashamed, or they don't feel guilty for putting you into that situation. And again, when you confront them, and when I confronted them, like my manager at that time and two managers, again, they blame you. So as it was your fault, as it was my fault, I was the one who put myself into that situation. So they create a surreal environment in which you should try to survive, but it's not real, right? There is no reality. And then you start thinking, what's going on? You know, how did I end up in this situation? So this must be my fault that I ended up in that situation. And then you think, how can I avoid it in future? So it's like a slippery ground, right? And you don't know, oh, how did this happen now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that the expression, they create a surreal environment, because that's exactly how it feels like, actually. They create another, it's like I even had the feeling, it's like they even live in another reality themselves, and they fully believe in that, right? So yeah, it's very, this is also, I think, importantly, a place where a lot of us go wrong. It's like we project our own consciousness or level of consciousness on other people, and we think they have the same values or standards, moral standards, but actually they don't, and which means that they're also willing to go much further than you would ever have dared to. Most people would ever have, they would have stopped long before. And that's where they often take us aback, because they surprise us by doing things that we simply could not imagine that somebody is able to do.
Yeah, for example, what happened to me once was I was driving to a meeting early in the morning at 7 o'clock, and before I had checked my emails, because we were waiting for a very important message from an authority. And I checked my emails and there was no email. So I left the house and I was driving to the meeting, which was going to take place at 8 o'clock. So, and in the middle of the, way, I got a call from my manager shouting at me, blaming me for not having forwarded him the email that we have received from the authority. I was like, hey, I didn't see it. I will check. I checked my emails before I left the house, but I didn't see. But let me stop. I was on the motorway. Let me stop somewhere and I'll check. And then I did that, while I was talking to him, and I checked and I had no emails. I was like, there must be something wrong. And in the end, we found out there was like a disruption with the server. So some emails were not distributed to certain people, but he got it and I didn't get it. So I was shouted and I was blamed. And then I was forced to drive to office and cancel the meeting, right? But for something that I haven't done, I was made guilty, as it was my fault, right? And then on the way, like it took me 1 hour to go to the office. On the way, I was thinking, how can it be? What did I do? What else could I have done that I should have received, that I could receive that email? But in the end, an email was sent out by IT that there were some disruptions, that they apologized for that. So I was like, oh, luckily it wasn't my fault. But I was made to feel that it was my fault.
Yeah, I think that's very typical as well.
Yeah.
Great. Other traits are often they're actually quite intelligent. So that's also something we should not underestimate. But it's more like a left brain intelligence often, right? That especially those who lack empathy, they don't have, the right brain is more the emotional, are giving us the holistic view, the more empathic views as well. So they can be very intelligent.
Yeah. What's your experience? Do you have an example that you can share with us in that respect?
Well, I think they are, I have to think of an example for that. Of course, I think one of the reasons why they are put in leadership roles is because they can be very good at what they're doing, or at least very good at pretending that they're very good at what they're doing. And some of them can also be extremely good, right? They can be specialists in an area maybe, and that can be one reason. That's something I often heard as a reason why a company does not get rid of these people, is because they are considered that they need them in that role, and then it becomes like secondary whether their leadership style is not working so well for the people below.
Yeah, I think they can be very good. They can be very good subject matter experts, but because they lack the empathy, they cannot be the real, people leader. What I have seen so far was, many times that, for example, I give you an example that they would give a presentation to the bigger audience, but the content has been created by some other people, right? So they get the recognition for the presentation. They get an award or whatever, for a work, but the work itself has been done by a group of people, and these people don't pass the recognition to those people because they want to shine on the stage themselves, and they want to get all the awards and recognitions themselves. So I have seen that many times. The other thing that I had also seen is that, like, when you go to someone else, like higher up, and share your story and say, look, this is happening, and and what the answer, I was like, oh, are you sure? Are we talking about the same person? No, it cannot be. Are you really, really sure? Again, you are made to feel that, oh, there is something wrong with me. I'm making up things. I'm inventing stories. No, because of these people, it's like a double personality. They have two different personalities. They can shine and manage well upwards, but then they don't manage well downwards, right? So they can behave differently depending on the situation.
Yeah, I think that's very typical, and that they have these two-faced personalities. Sometimes they can be charming in one instance and then mean in another. So that's also something to look for, to recognize these people. And of course, they're very good at managing upwards, and maybe they treat people differently downwards. And the people above cannot simply imagine that this is happening because they're seeing a totally different person. That was very much as well, I think, the case in my case, that that's also what makes it very hard to escalate, because they can play these different roles. Yeah. So that goes into also another trait, which is that they can be very manipulative and controlling, so that they can or they can even be very charming and in a superficial way as well. They have these traits that they can show different faces to different people. And in the end, it also means another big thing that they do is lying, right? They can be compulsive liars, twisting things around when you try to say something or try to point out something that they said yesterday, and they pretend that they didn't say that, or that is really this inconsistency in, maybe they say something and they do something else.
Yeah, definitely. I have seen that as well, and I have experienced it myself, that actually something was said to me face to face, and at a different time when I made reference to what he said, it was like, no, I didn't say something like that. No, that's not true, right? And you're like, even in writing, right? I mean, when I had received, let's say, when I had received an email which was really aggressive, and then I was sharing that with someone else to show the aggressivity that is going on. And when he was confronted with that, it was again, no, I tried to say this, and how your interpretation is different. But you look at the words. That's not aggressive. So even a written email that is very clear, they can tweak it. They can play with the words.
Yeah, they're masters at tweaking things around. I used to say that because they have this extremely good ability to convince other people of what they're thinking, right? And I just wish they would use it for good and not for bad. I was something saying, I'm sure this person can convince everybody in this room that this white wall is green, you know? That's actually how good they are.
Yeah. And they can gossip behind your back.
Yeah, they're good at I think that's very often part of their agenda, that they try to destroy your reputation. So this is something I think everybody has to be very much aware of. It's how if you give them enough time, they can actually destroy your reputation behind your back. So before you come to the point that you maybe escalate and want to do something, these people that you talk to are not going to listen to you anymore because they've been told another story about you.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's very tricky.
Yeah, and the lying, I think another important term as well around the lying is what you call gaslighting. And it's exactly what you were explaining, this thing that, you know, he wrote an aggressive email, but when they're confronted with it, they present another story and they contest it. And they create this situation, this surreal situations where you start questioning your own reality. And I think that's also a very good pointer to understand that you're dealing with the bullies when you start questioning your own reality, because what you experienced.
Exactly. And then you ask yourself, because you are going to label, you're going to be labeled as too emotional, because you give an emotional meaning to this expression, right? So you feel you're not resilient enough, or you're not agile enough. So you cannot cope with the situation. Whatever, you know, you get all those labels stick to your body, and then you have to walk and you need to live with that in your work environment. And none of those labels belong to you.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really important that we know ourselves and that we can also stand in our own truth in the situation that it's easy to get swayed if we don't really know ourselves properly. And if we're not able to set strong boundaries.
Yeah. So what's our next?
Yeah, I have a long list here. What else did I note down? Grandiosity is another one, meaning that they're often very power and status driven, which is probably also the reason why they often are found in leadership roles. They need to win all the time. They need to be in charge, and they really hate having their authority questioned. That was something I experienced very strongly, that this person was very controlling, was very important to be in charge. And if you try to question that authority, that can lead to quite strong reactions.
Yeah, I made the same experience. If I can give an example, for example, my manager was used to call my presentations Playmobil presentations, because I integrate lots of charts, graphs, or figures into my presentation, and less text as possible. And every time we were going to present something to a bigger audience, he wanted to bet with me. He was like, I bet nobody will like your presentation. I was like, why should you bet? Why do you want to bet? And let's bet for dinner. If you lose, you will pay me a dinner. I was like, sorry, I'm not going to have dinner with you, and I'm not going to, go into a bet. And so, they're like very competitive. He was very competitive, and he was kind of competing with me. I was like, why would he compete with me? He should compete with people that are higher in the hierarchy, or better. I mean, he's my manager. He should not compete with me. So it was like, for me, it did not make sense until I learned as well, like through you, that this is one of the signs or behaviors of the bullies, right? It's a very clear sign and behavior of a bully.
Yeah, they're very competitive, absolutely, and they have a very strong will. So another thing, way of recognizing is that somebody who just simply won't back down, no matter how much proof is kind of brought to the opposite, they still kind of keep their position. I think that was one of the reasons where the light bulb went on for me. Was for a very long time, I thought that this person that I considered the bully was, she didn't get it because she thought I was the only one complaining, because other people had complained, but behind her back, so she didn't know about it. But at the moment when everybody openly said the same things in front of her, and she still did not back down, that's when I understood that, hey, that's really not normal. 100% of the people who ever work for you are saying the same thing, and you're still not able to take it in as something that might have to be changed a bit. I think that's quite a strong sign as well.
Definitely, because they don't want, they take it as like a criticism, right?
But they can't take criticism, basically.
Yes, and even if you say something in their favor, they take it as criticism, so they push back.
Yeah.
So they're not open to any improvements because they have this narcissistic personality. They think they are the best, and they're whatever, you know, they're the best in everything.
Which I think is also a sign, when you start to look a little bit behind our mask, this also shows that they are fear-driven. That's why they can't take criticism. That's why they're so competitive. That's why they feel like they have to push other people down. I think if they consider somebody or as a competition, they feel like they have to push them down.
Yeah. And I also believe, and this is also what I have also seen so many times, is because they are fear driven, because it's the fear is a feeling that they know, right? So based out of this feeling, they create an environment, a fear environment, where people feel, you know, afraid, like they're anxious, where they become anxious, and they start not speaking up. So they don't speak up. They suffer in silence because there is an atmosphere of fear. And if you in your work environment are in an atmosphere of fear, it means there is no psychological safetyness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important point as well. I mean, so many organizations have a fear culture.
And they don't kind of recognize it well enough. They probably recognize it and try to fix certain things, and it's not successful long term. It's like symptom treatment. But some companies, I think, also don't realize it, that there is a fear culture.
Yeah. So what else did we think about here? Yeah, for instance,
but we had the perfectionism, right?
Yeah, perfectionism. Sometimes they can be very perfectionist, that they always look for faults in other people.
Do you have an experience with that, or an example?
Oh yeah, I mean, I felt like in my case, this person was trying to undermine my reputation, right? So they would try to find fault with everything. And I experienced all these things that, you know, like you say A one day and B the other day. And then when I confront them with, well, yesterday you said A, they would be like, no. And that's where I remember reading once towards the end, because, you know, when somebody if you deal with a little bit of a difficult person, you try to figure out their logic, right? what's their logic, so that you can adapt and so that you can have less problems, and you can just do things the way they want it to be done, and then basically you can have your peace. But what I remember reading once, an article which said the logic of these people are what serves my self-interest in this moment. So if that was A yesterday and it's B today, I started laughing when I read that, because it really explained so much, and it was just like, yeah, now I get it.
Yeah. I mean, same with me, right? I mean, one example that I can share is that every email I was supposed to send out, and I was managing 19 projects in parallel. Can you imagine 19 projects in parallel? And for every email that I wanted to send out, I needed his approval. So I had to send it to him first for review. And once I have his approval, then I could send it out. Can you imagine the delay that has been caused with that, right? And that is like, I was made feeling powerless, because I did not have the power to send out one single email without his review and approval. And that's actually something that can damage your personality and create anxiety. And whenever he called me into his office to share with me some improvement techniques or to give me some feedback, I was like, what is he going to tell me? How is he going to blame me? And then he's like, oh, by the way, you have forgotten a comma here. You should add a comma there. I was like, oh my God. For that, I was called into his office. So, and then with that, my anxiety level was developed. I had developed anxiety, and the level of anxiety had increased. And it took me up to 7 years to get rid of that anxiety. Can you imagine? So the damage that these people are creating. And then the next time I was writing an email, I was like, okay, please don't forget the comma. Don't forget the comma. And then you forget the comma, right?
Yeah, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. Yeah, so because you're so tense all the time and so scared of making a mistake, and that kind of brings about more mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you are giving a responsibility today, and tomorrow this responsibility is taken away from you. And then the day after, they give it back to you. It's like, should I take the responsibility? Should I not? Am I responsible? Am I not? So it's like, again, you don't know what to do. Or, I mean, I'm sure you had experienced that as well, that you were just left out of the meetings. You're preparing yourself, you're invited to a meeting, you go there and you're told, oh, you're not being invited. It's like, but last week I was in that meeting, so it's like a repeating meeting. I should be here. No, your manager is here.
Yeah, there's 100,000 of these stories, right? I mean, I'm sure many of the listeners can also relate to this. So this is, I mean, we're trying to give you some examples so they can, and I'm sure everybody can, who are dealing or have been dealing with such a situation, they can probably recognize them. I mean, it's always different flavors and different degrees. And yeah, I also had, many similar situations.
Yeah, and they can also share their examples with us, right?
Yeah, we would love to have more examples, actually. So what are other things that are very typical? I think very typical as well is that how they're good at using your fears. It's like they intuitively feel what your fears are, and then they use it against you. So they put you in this, they know how to put people in the state of fear. And that's also why they create the fear culture. So yeah, honestly, I mean, if you feel like an organization has a fear culture, then they really need to look at what type of role models they are promoting as leaders in that culture.
Yeah, you can easily figure that out, right? You can look at the leaders, their communication style, and then their behavioral style, and easily find out what is the corporate culture.
Yeah, so, and they're what is so important is like every culture has like a unspoken reward system, right? Everybody are looking who are the ones who gets promoted, who gets the best projects, maybe who gets a raise, things like that. And this can be unwritten system, but everybody will notice and know how did that person behave who actually did get promoted, and then people will imitate that if they also are ambitious and want to get ahead in the company.
Exactly. That's why a lot of people, if they want to become, if they want to move up in their career, if they want to get a promotion, they live very closely to their managers, right? To those people. So, but then everyone else is kind of left out. But a lot of talents that are in that group who do not become visible because they don't want to share, or they don't want to behave this way. They just stay in darkness.
Yeah.
And only those who actually show those behaviors, similar behaviors than this leader, right? They move up.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's something that companies really need to look at and be more conscious of.
Definitely.
And yeah, just to go further on the list that we had here, I think we wrote also irresponsibility. So the fact that these people don't take responsibility themselves for their mistakes, they usually always have to blame somebody else. That is very typical. And they also think that they can get away with that forever.
Yeah, and in most situations, they get away with that, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, at least for quite a while before it's somebody puts down a foot.
Exactly. So I mean, normally people would commit a mistake, and learn from the mistakes, or you would apologize yourself if you have done something wrong, or if you have recognized that you have hurt the feelings of someone. But those people, they don't apologize themselves. They don't, they take it as granted. If someone feels that he or she has been hurted, that's their own perception, right? Their own way of giving a name or meaning to the situation. Oh no, why should I apologize myself? So it's not my problem. It's not my mistake. It's not my whatever, and which is actually very sad to see those type of behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last point we noted down here is that they can also have very impulsive and antisocial behavior. So they can be very aggressive sometimes, maybe willing to attack without being attacked themselves. And they can even sometimes, in the worst cases, very full-fledged bullies would be willing to engage in both immoral and maybe even illegal conduct sometimes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there is this verbal aggressivity that you can see here, and there is actually the psychological aggressivity that you don't necessarily see all the time. You can witness it from time to time, but it's like a hidden aggressivity, right? It can be like, we shared some examples, like not including you into meetings. Kind of not letting you to receive some types of communication, disconnecting you from the cycle of communication, or not inviting you to certain type of lunch or dinners. These are all psychological aggressivity that they consciously do, again, so that you feel helpless and powerless and left out. like you're not important. Oh, we don't care about you. And then all of a sudden the dynamic of the team changes, right? Because people who want to shine, they move with him or with her, and the rest, it feels kind of obliged to belong to that group, and you are left alone.
Yeah, so they can do it that way. I was also sidelined from a work point of view, for instance, that I wasn't given new tasks anymore, a new project. So yeah, there are so many ways that this is playing out, and I hope that we've been able to kind of shine a light on some of the most typical ones in this podcast today. And but there are so many examples, and we would be very happy to receive also comments and examples from our listeners.
Definitely. And we can also learn from them and their experiences, negative experiences, of course. And then eventually we can have like a collection of bullying behaviors in the end.
Yeah, and that's also basically what this bully quiz of Sam Horn is. It's also putting a light on many of these typical behaviors which can be noticed. So, and it's just important to be aware that this is bullying behavior, and to be clear about that, because that's the first step to be able to recognize what's happening.
Yeah, and also, as we said earlier, to make it to differentiate it from a lack of leadership style or leadership style, aggressive leadership style. Of course, it is part of it, but to really consciously become aware of these behaviors, and that this behavior should not be tolerated in the work environment, especially when the company cares about psychological safetyness of their employees. And in our later episodes, we will talk about, what to do about it if you recognize this type of behaviors, and why do they bully, right? There are reasons also why they bully. And so in the next episodes, we will talk more about those. But today, I think we could at least shine some light on the typical behaviors, bullying behaviors in the work environment.
Yes, and I love that you brought that point up again, that it can also just be bad leadership styles because somebody are adopting these types of behaviors just because that's what you kind of need to survive in your environment. So I would also invite all listeners, to think about, what is the environment I'm in? Are some of these typical characteristics very often present? How am I behaving? Am I maybe also engaging in some of these type of behaviors in order to survive in this environment? And yeah, do also a little bit of a self-examination, and also examining the whole environment and how much that is also, because we are often following the group, and we're adopting these behaviors without actually being bullies, so it can be learned.
Yeah, definitely. And also probably they can also think, okay, is there someone that I am witnessing being bullied? And how is my reaction to it? How is this person being bullied? And do I just see it and don't do anything, as you said, or is there certain things that I can do and help the person?
Yeah, and one way is definitely to give them our podcast to watch. Or maybe if you are one who have watched this and have some knowledge about what is bullying behavior, that's also something you could contribute to helping that person understand what's going on, because our experience is also that many people don't really understand what's happening.
Definitely. Thanks for listening.
Yay! Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And have a good day.
Definitely. Bye-bye.
Bye.